I am beyond thrilled to introduce you today to our new Executive Director, Linda Fiore. Hi, and welcome to Creating a Family, talk about adoption, foster care, and kinship care. I'm Tracy Whitney. I am the host of both creatingafamily.org's podcasts, one that drops on Saturdays called Weekend Wisdom, and this one that drops every Wednesday and is usually an hour-long interview format for families to strengthen and support themselves with the tools that our experts bring us. Today, we've got a little bit of a different feel. We're thrilled to introduce you to Linda Fiore. Linda is a seasoned leader with more than 20 years of experience in adoption and family services. She earned her master's degree in sociology and social work from DePaul University, and she has held program director and executive director roles spanning foster care, search and reunion services, and adoption support. Linda has served on multiple adoption councils and played a role in shaping adoption legislation, reflecting her dedication to advancing the field. Her work includes guiding adoptees, birth parents, adoptive families, and grandparents raising grandchildren, demonstrating a deep commitment to supporting diverse family structures. She's been personally touched by adoption, and she brings not only professional expertise to the table, but also heartfelt compassion. And we are thrilled to have her as our new executive director here at creatingafamily.org. And we're thrilled now to introduce her to you. So welcome to the podcast, Linda.
Thank you, Tracy. It's great to be here and really great to be part of Creating a Family. I'm really excited about this role.
I'm so glad that you said yes.
Me too.
So let's start at the beginning and talk about what brought you into the world of adoption, foster care, and kinship care, because you've spanned all of them now.
I have. And, I've been asked that question a lot. And what I notice is when I'm asked that now, that answer looks a little different than, maybe 10 years ago. I used to say, because I was in the world of adoption, people said, why adoption? How did you get here? What interested you? And I gave a very vague answer, but to me it was true. It was, I just knew I wanted to be in adoption. And as time went by, I learned things about my own family history that made that quote, just knowing, it made that I understood. And I was able to reflect back on my lived experiences as well. And so the older I got, I was able to see how those lived experiences really, shaped what my goals were. I can remember just always having a strong desire to help people. I know that sounds cliche, but it truly is what has guided me in all of my work. I mean, back to my days on the playground, if someone scraped a knee, I wanted to help them. If someone was being bullied, I wanted to make sure they felt okay. It really started at a young age. And then growing up in a family where my parents raised my 4 nephews. And that was my first experience with kinship care, which of course, at that time, there wasn't this name and recognition to it.
Right.
So I saw the importance of relatives stepping up and stepping in to help children who, didn't have parents that were able to care for them. And more than anything, I saw how hard it was for my parents because they didn't have resources. I remember asking questions like, well, why don't you just say this? Or why can't we do this? And they didn't have the answer because they had no one to turn to ask these questions. And, whether it was a challenging behavior that one of my nephews was exhibiting, or difficulties with boundary setting with my sibling, or challenging school situations, they had to just figure it out because that's what they were supposed to do. And it was also my introduction into mental health. Growing up, that's not something talked about a lot in many families. And it really brought to my attention the importance of not only treating mental health, but understanding it and understanding how it impacts the individual with the mental health diagnosis, helping the family, and really the importance of learning how to treat it, both, medically, but within a family system. So I took all of that and I was like, I knew this is what I want to do. I didn't know exactly how it would come to be, but I knew I was going to go to school and I was going to learn and have a career that helped people and helped families.
So in those early years when you were getting that career off the ground, what was the why that kind of kept you pushing forward into these very hard spaces and hard conversations?
Yeah, at a young age, and I think this is, and I definitely don't want to speak for everyone. I will speak for myself, but I do think something very common in people that are going to school for social work or to be part of the social service sector in some way, they go thinking and believing and wanting to make a change. I remember thinking, well, I've got this. I was a little naive, but I'm going to make all the changes and I am going to help. And I left school with all of this knowledge and I wanted to turn that into a career that helped people and made an impact. And while my careers and the specific roles have changed, that has always been at my core, that why. It has kept me through the ups and downs. Like you said, these are some challenging spaces. But when I come back to that core why of why, the reason I do this, it's to help children, to help families, to support them, and to really make an impact, whether that's in a direct service role, an executive director role, whatever it is I'm doing, I know that I can make some little impact. And it's all the littles that make the collective big.
So what are some of the character traits or personal values that kind of kept you moving forward in those times when you were trying to implement your why?
Well, I learned, first and foremost, the value that you have to have compassion. You have to have compassion for the people you're working for, who you're advocating for. And one word that I think of a lot when I think about what kept me going is, you have to have this persistence, whether it's persistence in meeting with legislators to help them understand that lived experience is just as important as the laws that they're making and how they are,
Right.
both equally important. So I really, it was critical for me to continue figuring out a way to be supportive in this space.
So I'm thinking persistence and compassion are a great pairing for this world that you've moved into. So let's talk a little bit about the things that were your first introduction, shall we say, to creating a family. How did you first hear about us and what was your impression?
So my previous role, I worked as an executive director in a domestic infant adoption agency. And in that role, I had, I wore many hats, as most executive directors do, especially in the nonprofit world. And one of those was learning what the needs of our families were. And I was always very interested in what we had. They were called open house sessions, and they were a 30-minute free session for families to learn about our agency. And it was always interesting to hear what they were coming to us with, their beliefs. And I thought, it's so important that we find the right education and training for families. And one thing that was really becoming common was prenatal substance exposure. The women that we worked with who were making an adoption plan, their children were being born having been exposed to substances. And one of the trainings we required for our families was a prenatal substance exposure training that was offered by Creating a Family. And I was so impressed with how it's trauma-informed, evidence-based research that really helped families understand. So we have families that would say, I'm open to adopting a child who's been exposed prenatally to drugs and alcohol, but they didn't really know what that meant. they were eager to adopt, and that's what they wanted. And so this training was so valuable for our families. So I was very grateful to creating a family for that.
Well, yay to our education team. Woohoo.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about your role as executive director in that previous setting. What were some of the lessons or challenges that you experienced there that prepared you for a leadership role here?
Yeah. I look back at that position, and I look really way back to when I started, and all of the valuable lessons that I learned. I started in a really challenging role as an intern, and I won't take you too far back, but just little glimpses, because each role really did impact and prepare me for this role today. And I was in internship with juvenile probation in Chicago, which was extremely challenging. But it was that introduction, and I was still really excited, and I still am today, but to make an impact on the youth. And I found what my strengths were and what I still needed to work on. And being 21 working in juvenile probation was quite challenging. So I, went back to school, and that's when my knowing of adoption came to be. And I worked in an area called post-adoption, and I stumbled upon it. And it was providing search and reunion services for individuals that were adopted during that closed adoption era, the era where everything was a secret. And I helped birth mothers who placed during that time find their birth child and reunite them, and adult adoptees would come to our service and search for their birth families, their birth mother, their birth siblings, their birth father. And really during that time, I learned how this lifelong search for identity impacted them. I took that direct service, and I knew I wanted to make a difference on a higher level, and that's when I stepped into some legislative work. I felt that adoptees deserve to know their birth story. We all do, and people that know their birth story may take that for granted. So I worked on legislation in Illinois for the original birth certificate release, and that was a bill that was passed and went into law in 2010. So I was really excited to take that direct service, and that was my first experience of really combining the direct service and what I learned from the people I was serving, and how you can elevate that and try to make an impact and changes on another level. As a foster care caseworker, I learned about connection, and again, all of these little pieces are so big and important, and really do prepare me for this role. I'll never forget, I was on call as a foster care caseworker, and it was 2 a.m, and everyone loved to get calls at 2 a.m, and learned that, one of the children who was on my team had run away from his foster home. So I picked him up from jail and took him per the protocol. We went to the emergency room, and he got examined, and I'll never forget the doctor stepping out of the room saying to me, "Well, where's his parents?" And in that moment, as a caseworker, I thought, well, how does the doctor not know? And not that it's the doctor's fault. It is, again, what I so strongly believe with creating a family is the education and the training, not only for families, but for professionals like an emergency room doctor who's examining this child and doesn't know where his parents are. That's a moment that always stuck with me, and was always, just really made me understand and appreciate the education and training piece. And, connection to the people that I'm advocating for. That same child, we were driving around, and because of the time, 2 a.m., we were not able to find a foster home placement for him. And we, with this child, struggled greatly to find relatives as well. And I was taking him to a shelter for youth. And I'll never forget, he said, Miss Linda, why can't you just take me home? You treat me like I'm a normal child.
Yeah.
He's like, you make me feel like I'm just a normal kid.
Aw.
And those words were so impactful, that no matter what level of work I'm doing in this area is treating everyone the same,
Yeah.
that we see him as a child, not a foster child, but a
Right.
child, that needs a supportive adult in their life.
Yeah.
And, in that job specifically, the leaders that I had really helped shape the type of leader I wanted to become. And, what I saw as the most important trait they had is they never lost touch with the work that was being done on the ground. They always stayed informed. They wanted to understand the complexities of the families that we were working for. And that's always stuck with me as well. I still have great mentors in my life, and what kept them grounded was remaining compassionate and wanting to understand. So I look back at all of my careers and the leaders I've worked with, the importance, like I mentioned, with the doctor in the emergency room of training and education. So those frontline workers can have that trauma-informed care that they should be providing. And I know that was a long answer,
No,
but
it's
I hope that was
great.
helpful.
It is helpful. I think, what I'm hearing come out of that is that you have a very deep connection to every human being's need to be seen and heard as the unique and precious human that they are.
Yeah.
And when you can carry that through all the different iterations of your career through to where you are now, that says a lot about the impacts that were made on you along the way, the people that touched your life, the roles that you played, and the learnings that you had the opportunity to participate in.
Yeah.
And then integrating them all into a position like this. I say we're all the better for it. I mean, it's such a boon for us as an organization. And speaking of the organization, when you heard about the opportunity to pursue the position of executive director, what was it about our specific mission or our evolution as an organization that drew your interest to pursue that?
Yeah. I was drawn to creating a family, like I had mentioned, just with the little taste I got through the prenatal substance exposure training. But really, it opened me up to learning more about just the mission of creating a family in general, and its commitment to strengthening adoptive, foster, and kinship families. And not only the dedication, but the how you were doing it. So in my career, I've taken many trainings, as a professional, and I've watched many panels, a spectrum of training and what that looks like. But what I always thought is that so much of the training was based on opinion, which can be extremely useful in certain situations. I mean, it's critical to listen to a panel where people are sharing their lived experience, because that is very powerful. But it often, what I found in certain areas, it left both the professional and the family really lacking that understanding of what they were supposed to be walking away with. And with creating a family, I was so excited to be part of something as important as education and training, because again, from being a foster care worker to an executive director at an adoption agency, I saw the importance of education, and that it was, this trauma-informed, evidence-based research that was the driving factors to creating these trainings was so impressive. And I was really excited to be part of an organization that did that, because they know how important it is for strengthening families.
Yeah. We've been so fortunate to have the exposure to so many experts that have willingly given their time and their expertise and their wisdom and their lived experiences to create the content that we get to create literally every single day. How did you know that jumping into this role was the right next step for you?
That's a good question. And and again, without trying to be too vague, I knew I was ready to take another step. So just as in my work in post-adoption, where I had an abundance of critical, important direct service, it was elevating that to a level, taking that direct service and moving into working on legislation. And the same can be said for this transition too. I was in a role that I still did a lot of direct service. That is so important. And also seeing the importance of the education and training. I remember a family coming to us talking about, their fears of open adoption and why they don't want to have an open relationship. And the fears were valid when they're coming not really understanding, but being able to provide training and education that helps kind of demystify all of those myths that they're coming to our agency with. I knew that was the right next step to move into a space where I can focus on the education, the training, the resources, and making sure that they get out there to the people that need them. So I was excited to make the transition.
I love the way you said that, to demystify the myths that they come in with, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
But then when you learn it, you can do better and you can prepare yourself more roundly and wholly. And I love that that's been your mindset. Like, let's help them know more and know better.
Right.
I'd like to interrupt this conversation with our new executive director for just a moment to remind you about one of the fantastic resources we offer at Creating a Family. We have a library of 15 free courses that are sponsored by the Jockey Being Family Foundation. You can take one course, you can take 2 or 3 courses, or you can take all 15. They come with a certificate of completion that you can use for education credits if you need them. And you will be prepared and equipped and trained well by these courses. They're all designed to strengthen your family and to strengthen your parenting toolbox. The address to find these resources is bit.ly/JBF support. That's bit.ly/JBF support. Thanks so much for indulging this little interruption, and let's go back and listen to what Linda has to say about creating a family. When you look at where Creating a Family stands today, what do you perceive to be our greatest strengths as an organization?
Yeah. So in the short 4 months I've been here, I see an organization with so many significant strengths. First, I feel that I have to acknowledge the staff and their dedication. I really do, because an organization can have the greatest mission. It could have the most amazing goals and values, but if you don't have a committed staff that grabs onto that mission, that's excited about doing the work, those goals don't come to fruition without the staff. So I do want to say that the staff is an incredible strength, because that's what makes this work possible. I think that things like our website is it's such a strength. It is full of so many resources. One of the challenges I've learned is accessibility for both families and professionals, and the website is so accessible. It is full of great book pages and recommendations and articles and just really important content for individuals. So I love that exists and it's accessible for others, and so much of it is free also.
Yay, free.
People love free.
Yeah.
I've touched on this a little bit throughout is our prenatal substance exposure. And again, what really drives trainings like that
Yeah.
is listening. I think it's such a great strength of our organization that we don't sit in meetings, and I mean, we do sit in a lot of meetings, but it's what really drives what we're producing is listening to the needs of others. Because if you're not listening to what's truly needed, you're not creating something that is going to have an impact. We might think something is important, but we have to listen to the community that we are serving. And so I think that's an incredible strength of creating a family. And also the role that they are taking in the space of kinship care and how strong that has become with support groups, which are so valuable, having that peer-to-peer connection. Unless you've experienced it yourself, you can't quite understand. So that the fact that we create a safe space for that to happen, I think is tremendous, and a huge strength of just really recognizing the importance of kinship care. And I could probably go on forever. There's so many strengths. But really, I mean, we are a leader in this field. We do important work, and it's because of all these strengths.
We do have the greatest team on the planet. We all genuinely love what we do and whom we are doing it for. Yes. And it's such a pleasure to be part of a team like that.
And the longevity. Just the longevity of staff, I think, speaks volumes to the commitment.
Yeah, we have a very low turnover rate,
which is a great thing.
And you spoke a little bit about kinship resources. If you are listening today and you are interested in joining an online kinship supportive community, please email me at tracy@creatingafamily.org, and I would be happy to plug you into a kinship group that fits your family's needs as far as location and time, because we have in-person groups and we have online groups. So just a little plug for our kinship groups. And we do have several strategic priorities heading into the new year, including continuing to increase our kinship resources. But we're also going to be working on expanding our online education resources and kind of improving and raising brand awareness of who we are and what we do and why we do it. So why do you think kinship support is so crucial right now at this time in our culture?
First, I want to say that I'm very relieved, grateful, a lot of words to say that we're finally recognizing and valuing a long-standing, often overlooked foundation of care.
Yeah.
And I think, relatives who step in to care for children when their parents can't, it's the support they deserve is critical, and providing resources to them. And what we've seen really just with the substance exposure and mental health and what that has looked like in our world, and how that affects children and the parents' ability to care. I mean, so many relatives are needing to step in to care for children. And I think, supporting the families ensures stability, it ensures healing and permanency. I remember in my previous role, I was as an executive director at the adoption agency. We also did home studies for relatives who were adopting. Every state is different in their requirements, and in the state of Indiana, it was required that a home study be completed. And I remember speaking to this sweet girl. She was 9 years old, and her aunt was adopting her, and she talked about how happy she was to know she wasn't going to be taken away anymore. And that she would have the same bed to sleep in.
Yeah.
And whether it's formal kinship care with an adoption or informal, it still provides that permanency that a child deserves, and peace for the child and the family. And it's critical that we support that. and that we get information out there and that we provide resources. A lot of families don't know where to turn, and Creating a Family has done a great job with establishing legal options and workshops and information to help families.
And so many of these families are stepping in kind of under the radar, not involved with the foster system, not
Right.
involved with an adoption process. But those families deserve support and care and resources and information as well, even if they're not part of a formal system. And that's one of the things I love personally about the kinship resources that we offer, is that we don't ask, are you connected to a foster agency? It's
Right.
not some litmus test for us. We're like, oh, you're raising a grandchild? Here, we've got support for you and we want to help.
Yes.
And I love that that's one of the big impacts that we're making in this space.
Yes.
Can you give us a little sneak peek into some of the plans that Creating a Family has to deepen and broaden our impact in this kinship space?
Yeah, one of the things I love about Creating a Family is that we're always evaluating. We're looking at what we can do differently, what we can do better, what we can add on. And, for example, we are working on establishing another in-person support group in another county, which I think is phenomenal. Again, I mentioned that peer-to-peer. I love that we have the online support because that reach is so far. And to have these in-person groups also, I think we have talked about and understand the importance at those support groups that are in person,
Right.
having professionals come also.
Right.
A lot of caregivers, they're intimidated to
Yep.
seek help from professionals. They don't know where to turn to. They have shame that they're in this position. So the fact that we are understanding that and bringing professionals to them in their safe space, I think is incredible. We're working on really, again, getting the word out there. So I had a conversation with Dave Thomas Foundation, and their Wendy's Wonderful Kid recruiters in North Carolina were given information about, NC legal options, and so that they can tell their families. So really spreading the word is important, and knowing where to provide that information.
Yeah. So we also have kind of a strategic plan to increase and raise awareness of our online education programs. From your experiences in the field, tell us again why you think education in adoption and foster care is so crucial for families.
So, when I said the education, using that word demystifies,
Yeah.
people have a lot of beliefs, and I think the education helps, and it provides also practical tools, things they
Yeah.
can take in their everyday life, strategies that they can use. And it's often not something that you can find in just any book. I think having very specific education tailored to certain circumstances. So in adoption, many agencies ask, what are your preferences? Are you open to, like I had mentioned, adopting a child who was prenatally exposed to drugs and alcohol? Or, do you have a preference around race and culture?
Mhm.
And if they are open, they need to know what that means.
Right.
And, I think people come into, just using adoption as an example with the greatest intentions, but they need to learn. They need to be educated on the challenges, on the blessings, on all of it. And I think it's so critical. And I love that our research or our education expands across the country. We have such a large reach, and that's truly the way that we are going to make an impact, is if we
Yeah.
can reach more families and more
Yeah.
professionals.
Yeah, we work really hard when we're creating our online education to not just make it evidence based, where the science behind what this expert is sharing with you, but also then to bring it down to the practical. Here's 3 things you can try this week with your children.
Yes.
And then we support that with additional tip sheets and things like that, that parents can, take the course, pass the course, use the credits if they need to for foster care or for pre-adoptive training. But then they have a tip sheet that they can hang on to and refer to multiple times after the course is done. And I think as robust as our courses are, we're challenging ourselves to raise the bar and make the offerings even more robust and more applicable to everyday life. And I'm very excited about what's to come for that part of things.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that. And, in my mind, it's what builds a resilient community of caregivers and professionals. And this is a collective. We all need to be doing something, and that education is so important.
I mean, I help prepare some of the materials that go with those courses, and I feel like I learn something every single time I'm exposed to them. And I've been doing this for coming up on 10 years now with the organization. So if I, after 10 years, am still learning things, then parents who've never done it before certainly have vast opportunities to learn and prepare well to parent the child well, which is our end goal. That's our goal.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of new directions and growth and where creating a family is going, I'm very excited to tell you about our new downloadable parenting guide that we've called Navigating Challenging Behaviors: Practical Strategies for Families. It's available to you when you subscribe to our free monthly newsletter. So if you go to creatingafamily.org/newsletter and you choose the eye-catching black and white graphic there at the header of the page, you can sign up for whichever version of our newsletter best suits your needs, whether you're a professional or you're an adoptive or foster parent or you're a kinship provider. And when you get that guide, you can start learning all kinds of practical strategies that will help you support challenging behaviors that come from trauma or from prenatal exposure or anything like that. And if you like the guide, and you like that resource, then you should also consider liking and subscribing and following our podcasts, because we also offer in those resources very practical, implementable strategies that you can use to strengthen your family. When you do subscribe to the podcast or the newsletter, you will never miss the new big stuff that's coming down the pike from Creating a Family as we face into the new year and start implementing our strategic plans for where we're going. So thanks for letting me interrupt you for a second, and let's go back to finish up this great conversation with our new executive director, Linda Fiore. As we are continuing to raise awareness and get the word out about who we are and how we serve this community of foster, adoptive, and kinship communities, what's a message that you really want people to associate when they hear the word creatingafamily.org?
That Creating a Family is truly committed to education, to training, and to providing resources. That we are dedicated to making sure that families and professionals are equipped with what they need. That we help navigate these complex challenges that families are facing because of our training and our resources. So I want people to see us as a trusted resource. I think that's very important. There are many resources out there, but we are a resource that you can trust because of our process that is so in-depth.
That's awesome. I love that. What stories or values that you've carried thus far in your career and now are carrying into Creating a Family do you hope will come through, kind of the overarching story that you hope will come through for families?
That's a good question. And and I think I'm trying to see, the best way to answer it, to also make sure I'm not repeating myself, because I do think it's so intertwined. Everything is so interconnected. And I think, the message that I've carried with me from the beginning that I'm carrying now is having an understanding of the community we're serving.
Mhm.
knowing that everything we do, whether it's direct service, whether it's creating a training, whether it's listening to what the needs are, we're doing it for one collective reason, which is strengthening families and helping children. And I want that to come through in the work I do at creating a family also.
Yeah, that's great. So, give us kind of a peek at where you think creating a family is heading in the next few years.
I think so. What I love is creating a family is already recognized as a national organization. But in the coming years, what I see and hope is that we have a stronger reach in some additional states. While we're national, I think we can have more of a presence, and how that looks, there's a variety of ways, not to give examples yet, but I think we can have a stronger presence in some of the states. That, again, it's about expanding and really making sure people know about us and have our resources. And I think it's great that, I came into an organization that already had such a strong foundation. Dawn, the founder, what she established, what her vision was, I have so much respect for, and I'm excited to carry out that mission and continue that and see, what this expansion could look like.
So, over the years, your why has probably evolved a little bit. You alluded to that at the beginning of the conversation that, where you were 10 years ago is different than where you are now. What's your why that keeps you going kind of on the daily practical right now?
I've been so fortunate to work in touch like every level, of this field.
Mm-hmm.
Direct
Mm-hmm.
service, legislation, whether it's working with families as a caseworker or shaping adoption legislation, working with an expectant mother who is making one of the biggest decisions of her life. Um, and now into education, focusing on education and training. My why has always been the same. It is still to help these families, to help
Yeah.
individuals in a time of need. And those needs look different. So the needs have changed, but I do feel like my why has remained the same. It is what has kept me going. My strong connection to the work through my lived experiences also fuels my passion and the desire to continue in this field, which I think is really valuable.
What's one thing you've learned that you hope every family advocate or other professional involved in this work would carry with them from today's conversation?
I want people to recognize and realize, give themselves some grace. The work that they do truly matters. And that was such a hard concept for me to grasp at so many points in
Yeah.
my career. When you're out working crazy hours, you're handling many different crises, you are advocating and feeling like no one on earth is listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
The impact might not be immediately visible, but you are making an impact. Every act of support, when you're giving that support, when it's trauma informed, when you have compassion, it is making a difference. So the work that you do truly does matter.
We love our professionals who listen and who interact with us. And we're so grateful that they keep coming back to listen and take the courses and share the resources with their families that they're supporting. And I 100% wholly endorse everything that you just said. They are such a value to the system and to the services that they provide. They bring such value. And I'm so thrilled to kind of stand shoulder to shoulder with professionals like the ones that use our services and our resources.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up with one final question for those of us who are listening to today's conversation, whether you're an adoption professional or a foster care professional, or you're an individual mom or dad, foster mom or dad, kinship caregiver, what can our audience do to link arms with the mission of creating a family? What can individuals and professionals do to join the mission?
Yeah. First, I'll say spread the word. Our resources are valuable. Share our mission with others, bring them to our website. Encourage to listen to our podcast. At the adoption agency I was at, we would send out quarterly newsletters with resources, and the podcast was always on it because it had so much, just so much valuable information. So I would say spread the word. I would say that creating a family is always open to connecting with others who align, who understand the importance of our mission, whether that's collaboration, speaking engagements, sponsoring our podcast, anything that we can do together to raise awareness, I think is so important. And people can donate, donating through our website. It helps us. It directly supports our programs and our resources and our outreach efforts. So, I think any of those ways are great places to start.
Awesome. That's a great way to end it, because we want to link arms with those who have like hearts and like minds to what we're doing here at Creating a Family.
Absolutely.
Linda, thank you so much for your time. I know this learning curve of joining the team has been huge, and you're a very busy woman, so I deeply appreciate the time that you took to get ready for today's conversation and then join me for this interview. I'm very excited about the direction that we're headed and what Creating a Family is going to be able to grow to do to serve more families and support their kids to thrive. And that's really our end goal, is to build strong, healthy families where kids can thrive. So thanks for listening, everyone. We're so glad that you joined us. And if you liked today's interview, please, as Linda said, share the word and let others know about the work that Creating a Family is doing. Thanks, and see you next week.